So hello everyone, this is Mr. Peak and this is the extension work for Lesson 2, Variables and how we use them. So in this short video we're going to be looking at a word called concatenation. Now that sounds like a really big complicated word, but all it means in simple terms is to merge two strings together. Now what are strings? So if we move over to Create with Code, and let's look at this one first. So if I remove this, a string in Python and programming itself, it just means a little bit of text. So when you see this brown and orange sort of writing inside of Python, that's a string, it's text. So when we refer to concatenation, it means to join two strings together, to join two pieces of text. So here we've got two variables, we've got our boxes, and inside our boxes we've stored in first name John, in the last name Smith. So we've got a first name and a last name. So when we want to print that name, imagine we were using a database and we wanted to access someone's name and date of birth and all of that, for example, we would need to find out their name. So for example, we could use print first name and then comma for a second parameter and then last name. So when we run this, we can see that it prints John Smith because it's fetching the name John from the variable of first name and then fetching Smith from the variable last name. Again, if we were to change what's inside these speech marks, so maybe John Bob, and then click run, we can see that the name is John Bob. To make the program a little bit more efficient, we could use concatenation. So that means, again, to join two strings together. So to join two strings together, we will create another line of code, and we could use an example of maybe name the variable full name and then equals. So now we're going to put something inside of this box. We're going to join two things together. So we're going to say first name plus last name. So what we're doing here is we're saying this new variable full name, which is going to store the full name of the user, is a combination of both the first name variable and the last name. So it's going to say, right, well, what's inside the first name variable? Well, it's John. And what's inside the last name variable? Well, it's Smith. And then it'll put those two strings together. So we're using concatenation. And then we can, instead of printing these two variables in this one print and having to give the computer two variables, we could instead then print full name. Whoops. Remember, you can't have spaces. And we get the same result. We get John Smith. So we can use concatenation on a much larger scale. So imagine in databases where there are maybe thousands and thousands of users. Instead of using print to fetch two variables, which on a massive database could slow the program down a little bit, we would instead merge it into one variable called full name, just to make the program a little bit more efficient, like we did there. So the second thing I wanted to look at is, again, we can use that kind of idea to start merging and adding variables together. So we can see here that I've got two variables, and inside my first variable I've stored a number 1500, and in my second variable I've stored another number 7566, and then I've printed those numbers. So again, I've used that sort of add button, and then I've said number 1 plus number 2. And if I click run, we get the answer. So it runs a little bit like a mini calculator. So again, instead of printing number 1 and number 2, I could say answer equals number 1 plus number 2. And then in here, instead of writing number 1 plus number 2, I could write answer. And then again, we get the same result. So what I want you to do now is complete a little short task that I've prepared as the extension work, and when you finish that, I want you to upload that to Teams. Just a quick sort of interjection editing. So you don't just have to use plus. So when we're adding variables together, we can multiply, divide, and times just like we would in real life. So if you want to do that, instead of using the plus, if we backspace that, And then if we wanted to times, for example, we could use shift and then the number 8 key on your keyboard is where we get the little star. So it's not like an X, like in real life we have to use a star on a computer, and that means for the multiplication symbol. So if we then click run, we can see that we do have a very, very large number, so we have multiplied those together. It's the same with minus. If we click run, we see that we've got a negative number, and if we click slash, which is divide in Python, we can see that it's divided our two numbers. So we can use all four sort of methods of calculation in Python by using those different symbols. Okay, and after that edit, this is the extension task I want you to complete. So using the skills in the video that I've just shown you, solve those four calculations for me. And what I want you to do is, instead of doing two variables like number 1 and number 2 and then doing the calculation and then using the same variables, I want you to use as many variables as you need. So for example, my first question is 2675 times 7. So I would then write that in create with code here. And then for my second question, I would want you to write more variables like number 3 equals, and then if I move back over to the presentation, I can see that it's 675,367, so 657,000. Yeah, I can't remember the number. But use multiple variables, so don't just reuse the same two. I want you to reiterate those variables and keep going with every question. So I want to see evidence that you've completed every question, and not just sort of remove the number after you've got the answer. If that doesn't make sense, just ask in the chat, and I'll explain it to you live. The second thing is, the second part of the task, is using concatenation shown in the first half of the video, merge these two variables. So what I want you to do is create a variable that contains a string, a little bit of text, saying your age is. And then I want you to create a variable allowing the user to enter your age. So just like we did in the main video for the lesson, allowing users to input and then storing that input inside a variable, I want you to do the same thing. And then I want you to print the content of a third variable that added those two variables together. So in your final print statement, if we move back over to create with code, you can see in the first half of the video, I walked you through first name, last name, full name equals first name plus last name. You will have to do the same concept with an age variable and then like a fluff text variable that says your age is. So in the end, I want your print statement just to have one variable in it that will print your age is and then whatever the user entered. Again, if that doesn't make sense, or you're struggling with that, again, just post a message in the chat and I can explain it live and demo it for you again. But if not, pause the video here. This is the end, and please complete the task. Thanks for listening.